Pardon the interruption. I am Sam Mulberry, your professor for summer CWC, and I am joined by
Annie Berglund, out in South Korea.
Yes. So we are recording simultaneously at very different times a day. It is about 3 p.m. for me. What time is it for you, Annie?
Right now it's 5 a.m., so I'm watching the sunrise out my window.
All right. And are you a morning person?
No, I'm not. Are you?
I am, and I'm not an afternoon person. So we're both at our worst times right now, but we're going to make this work great. Annie, this is our intro to summer CWC. So when we think about this course, Christianity and Western Culture, what is this class? What does it cover? Why do students take this class?
Sure. So this course is important for the liberal arts education in general, right? Most liberal arts colleges have a course like this, a survey of Western civilization, of Western history. So a lot of times that looks like mostly focusing on Europe, though, of course, we'll talk about how the West spreads and it's not just contained within the continent of Europe. But so most universities have something like this. But what's special about Bethel is that Bethel is a Christian liberal arts college. And so we try to take this idea of a survey course of Western history, but add in the layer of how is this affecting Christianity? You know, whether it's looking at ancient history before Christ is even born, we talk about the context of ancient Rome, of ancient Greece, of the Jewish cultural traditions and values, and say, like, how do those overlapping important civilizations impact the world into which Jesus is born, and why are they important at that time? So we try to use context in the greater history to explain what Christians are doing, how Christians are responding. And so as it grows, we end up really talking about some big questions that are still important today as Christians, which is, how do we define our beliefs as Christians, especially as culture changes around us, and as we learn more about the world around us? And so we see how Christians move from this story of being persecuted in the early church to one of being tolerated by an empire, to having wealth and power and prestige. And we see Christians having to deal with these different types of contexts, a context of persecution versus one of prosperity. So in terms of some kind of overarching objectives of the class, I think there's many, but I think the ones that I most like to talk about, first is cultivating empathy. So this class isn't something where you are going to have to memorize a lot of dates. Like, we specifically tell you which dates you need to know for this class. Instead, we really want you to think about individuals, and we want you to think about what it's like to be the average person at this time, or the average Christian at this time. So how we cultivate empathy for places and time periods far different from the ones we're in. We have you read a lot of primary sources. And so it's not just about, learning who Aristotle is, who Socrates are, but instead reading some of their works. So we try to take in the disciplines of literature, political science, philosophy, history, kind of a survey even of the liberal arts disciplines, to cultivate historical empathy, to make us walk in the shoes of the people that we're learning. Another objective is to reconsider or sharpen or challenge our beliefs as Christians, to not just say, I believe it because I'm a Christian, but to say, why, how did these beliefs start? Is there a variety of beliefs around something? Are there diverging thoughts on even just things like baptism or transubstantiation, right? Where did those different beliefs start, and where do I line in, or where do I line up? And then finally, another really important objective is to ask big questions about who we are. So I already mentioned this a little bit, but if someone is to answer, I'm a Christian, who are you? I'm a Christian. Well, what does that mean about what I believe? What does that mean about what I do? And how do I relate to other people because I'm a Christian? So it's important for me to answer those questions just as a human being. So this course is really practical in those ways as well. So Sam, that's kind of my CWC in a nutshell. I'm wondering for you, why do we do CWC online?
Well, it's interesting because this is a course that is almost 40 years old. In a couple of years, we will celebrate the 40th anniversary of CWC as part of the gen ed curriculum. I have not been teaching it for all of those 40 years, but I have been involved for it's almost 30 years I've been involved in the course. But we've been teaching it online for the last 10 summers. So this is actually the 10th summer that we've been teaching this. And I think the online version of the course, there's obviously pros and cons whenever you think about modalities. So, I mean, one reason to teach this online in the summer is that it creates a little bit of convenience and flexibility. I mean, this is the one time that I teach this course where I have students who are in different states, who are all kind of all over the country, things like that. So it does create some flexibility that way. This is an asynchronous course, so we're not all coming together at the same time. So it does have that flexibility, but it is worth noting that every day, almost every day, you're going to have homework in this course. So that there is a time commitment to this, so I would plan 2 or 3 hours out of your day, your weekdays at least, you should be, giving to CWC. It won't always take that time, but sometimes it will take all of that time. So that's a piece of it. It provides that flexibility, but it goes beyond that. If it was just about convenience and flexibility, I don't know that it would be worth doing. It does some other things. So in a normal semester of CWC, this is a team taught course, you would have 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 professors teaching the course from different fields: history, philosophy, theology, political science, things like that. In this summer course, the way we have it built, you have a one teacher who's me, but you're going to encounter 22 Bethel professors teaching you from their fields. And those fields go even further afield than what I just said. We're going to see scientists. We're going to see people from other areas in the humanities, like literature, things like that. We're going to see multiple theological perspectives from different theologians. So we get a lot more voices in this course because of how it's built. And you're going to see the course delivered in some kind of non-traditional ways. So there's going to be a couple main ways that this course is delivered. One thing you'll see starting, the first day of class is documentary films. So we have a series of 10 documentary films that we put together that are built around interviews with these 22 Bethel professors. And those documentaries kind of give the narrative outline of the course. That's where a lot of the storyline of CWC is happening. So we'll do a number of those throughout these weeks. But those will get paired with some of those primary source readings that you were talking about, Annie. So we'll be watching those films and then reading from the people that we're studying in this course. And then we'll also have days where we will, instead of watching a documentary, we will visit a virtual museum. So we've built 8 virtual museums. And if you think about, normally in a classroom, you go to class, and if there's a lecture, that lecture is pretty linear, right? The person speaking has a place where they begin, they go through some sort of narrative arc, and it has an end. So you're kind of on rails. When we do these museums, it's the exact opposite. It's like visiting a real space. If you've ever been to a museum, they're not linear, right? You kind of explore, you see different things, you can go in different directions, you can experience things, you can pick and choose. And that's exactly what these museums have. So they're going to have some additional reading materials in them. There's going to be a lot of audio content, a lot of visual content, video content. And we're going to have a core of things that we're going to ask you for sure to look at as you're going through those museum assignments. But then there's also space for choice. So, a museum may have 3 hours worth of audio content. We don't expect that you're going to listen to all 3 hours of those. You'll probably listen to an hour, 70, 80 minutes. But there's choice in there. You get to kind of choose. We don't get to do that in a regular face-to-face course. So there is a kind of a value added to doing this online. So we'll have those documentary films, we'll have the museums, and then we'll have these webisodes 7 times throughout the semester. You and I are going to get together to record some things that are going to be really in the moment and being able to respond and react. So maybe I'll ask you this, Annie. What are we going to be doing in these webisodes? Why do we do this as part of the course?
Sure, yeah. To go off of what you just said, we try to create the face-to-face elements that students don't get when they're doing online, right? So this is visual, it's interactive. You're hearing two professors talk about something, talk about the readings, the events, the individuals in the course that you're learning about at that time. And we discuss it even on a more personal level too, how they impact our lives, or who is the most meaningful person this week that we learned about. So it's also a way for you to get to know some professors. Virtual learning offers obviously many very unique opportunities. More and more people are loving to take online courses, but we don't want to sacrifice the importance of meeting professors, right? And so we want you to get to know folks here at Bethel University. So here we are, and you'll learn about us a bit too, hopefully during this, and hopefully you won't learn too much about us. Hopefully we don't overshare. But another important thing about webisodes in terms of content is that there is no new content we're bringing up. All we're doing is rehashing it or going into a deeper level of content that you've already learned and studied in this class. So don't worry about coming to a webisode and learning something entirely new, some new person thrown in. We are literally just taking what you have already talked about. And we also can kind of model for you what a small group discussion would look like. So during a face-to-face normal fall, spring term, we have breakout kind of small groups that meet once a week. And since you don't have that to the same extent, here we are creating for you what that might look like to talk about these different ideas, these big objectives of CWC week by week. So Sam, what should students think about as they start this online session?
If I'm thinking about advice for taking this course, now that I've been through this for a decade, first thing, as I already mentioned, is pay attention to how much time you're spending that, and make sure you're giving yourself enough time. So I would make sure that I would be doing that. And I will say the students tend to do well in this course. The place where students start to struggle is if they get behind, if they skip a day or they start to fall behind. That's going to hurt them because they're going to be missing daily assignments, but it's also going to hurt them as we get closer to the exams. So the key thing here is staying up with the course. I would say as you're going through doing the readings that we're talking about, especially those primary source readings, be asking yourself, why? Why did they assign this reading? What are they hoping that I get out of this reading? So read with your eyes open and your mind open. Be asking questions like that as you read. If you're unsure about things, contact us. So my email address is in the corner here, s-mulberry@bethel.edu. Email me if you have questions. I'd be happy to either answer over email or, even better, set up a Zoom time where we can meet and discuss any questions you have. So be reading with your mind on and your mind open. I would say use the study guide. This is the biggest one, because if you go day to day in this course, it's possible to go through and do only what you need to do to complete the assignment for that day. And if you do, you can do well in those assignments. But if you're ignoring the study guide for the course, the vocab terms, things like that, when you get to the exam, you're going to realize that there's other pieces that you should have been paying attention to, either when you're watching the documentary films or when you're going through the museum. So familiarize yourself with the vocabulary terms in the study guide, and also the essay theme questions. So we have these themes in the study guide, and those give you some direction as to what exam essays might look like. So we'll talk more about those maybe as we get closer to the first exam, but I think the vocab is a great place to start. Whenever you watch a documentary film or go into a museum, have your study guide open up so you can see, here are the terms, here are the people, the ideas, the events that I should be looking for. And for each one of those terms, there are some questions you should be asking. So you should be asking yourself who or what this thing is. So define the term, who the person is, what the event is, what the idea is. You should be able to say when and where it is. So always be writing that information down, just who, what, when, where. Now, for the terms that are listed as mastery terms, there's one more question you need to ask. So recognition terms, just those three questions: who, what, when, and where. But for mastery terms, those ones up at the top of each block, there's one more question, and that is, why is this term significant? So Annie, as we think about significance, how do you, if you're working through something and you're trying to say, I don't know, how do I figure out what to say about the significance of a term, how do you go about that?
For CWC specifically, significance is why it's important to the Christian context, or why it's important to the larger context that we've been learning about. So it's more going beyond, reaching beyond just significance in the individual moment. So for example, why MLK Jr. is significant. Well, obviously he's significant for so much of American history, for where we are now, right? But try to think of him in the context of CWC. We talk a lot in this class about justice. And so MLK Jr. has specific explanations of what justice is like and how we reach justice as Christians. So if you think about the significance and marry it to the primary sources that you have, you end up having much richer significances. Also, what I usually tell students is that it's best to write out maybe 2, 3, or 4 significances instead of just sticking to one, right? It's good to have more out there, more written down, so that as you're studying at an A level, and when you get to a test, when you get to an assignment, you can make sure that you're studying beyond what you needed to know, because in those moments, sometimes we forget some of those details. So shoot for an A shoot for an A++, and then you'll see.
And it's also worth noting that the exams are open note and open book. So the better your notes are, the more helpful they're going to be on the exam. Annie, let me talk about the first assignment that we have to wrap up this first segment. There's 2 things you need to be doing that are due by the end of the day on Wednesday, June 15th. First, we have the syllabus quiz. So this should be right there in Moodle. You have access to the syllabus, you have access to the schedule, to the study guide, and to this webisode. So make sure you watch this webisode. But if you're hearing my voice, obviously you're watching this webisode. So there are questions in there. You can take this quiz as many times as you want. So there's no reason you shouldn't get full credit for this. But this needs to be completed by the end of the day on Wednesday, June 15th. So that's the first thing, take the syllabus quiz. Second thing is create a Poodle response. So I will start a discussion thread, and instead of having you type in your responses to these questions, I want you to, when you go into add a post, click on that little movie camera and just record a short video of you. This is how we're going to do our discussions, is through Poodle. So record a short video of yourself answering a few questions. So we want to know, let's see, tell us about yourself. So tell us your name, your major, tell us where you're going to be this summer. I'm always interested in where students are at when they're taking CWC. Tell us what you're most excited to learn about in this course. And then tell us something else interesting about you. So one other fact that we might find interesting about you, and trust me, everybody's got something interesting about them. If you don't know, tell us, about hobbies you have or anything like that. So tell us something interesting about you. So I'll create the first post. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. And then if you can just add your Poodle response videos in response to those. And when we do these discussion posts, don't just post your video, watch what other people have to say as well. This is how we're going to create a community within this course. Annie, that's all the time we have for this first segment. We'll be back in just a moment to dig into one of the big themes or ideas of this course. Welcome back, Annie. I want to talk really quickly about the theme verse for CWC, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about ourselves, because we actually have the unique distinction of being, I think, 2 of only 4 people in the history of CWC who have both taken the course, been a TA for the course, and taught the course. So there's a very small group of people who match that, and you and I are both part of that. So I want to talk a little bit about both of our experiences as being part of this class in multiple different ways. Going back to the very origins of this course, the theme verse for CWC has been Hebrews chapter 11 through 12:2. It's a little fudge there. Sometimes it's 12:1, 12:2, sometimes 12:3, but the early Hebrews 12. Hebrews 11, if you're unfamiliar with this, is kind of the litany of the faithful. So it is a chapter that talks about faith and the history of the faithful. So it starts at the very beginning of the chapter talking about Adam and how Adam lived by faith, and then how Abraham lived by faith, and how Isaac and Jacob lived by faith and how Moses lived by faith. And it goes through really the entirety of the Old Testament, of the Hebrew scriptures, talking about the men and women of faith and how living by faith really marked their lives and was this core piece of what it meant to be who they were, what it meant to be people of the covenant, people of God. And it goes from Adam all the way up to the time of the authors of Hebrews. So basically, throughout from the beginning of the Old Testament, the book of Genesis, all the way up to the book of Acts, and then it stops there because obviously the author doesn't know what's going to come after that. But then as we go into Hebrews 12 starts. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And that image of the cloud of witnesses, I think this touches on something you were talking about in the first unit. And I think this is one of the big things that we do in this course. The author of Hebrews is putting together this picture to say, all of those people who came before us, all those people who lived by faith before us, they have run their race. And now they are literally in our cloud of witnesses. So imagine them up above us, looking down on us. They are witnesses to our lives of faith. They are watching us as we run the race laid out before us, just as they ran the race before us. So imagine this as this great historical relay race. They've finished their legs. They've passed the baton on to us. And now we have this cloud of witnesses who came before us looking down on us. And I think this is really what this course is about, is how do we think about the history of the people of faith? And especially, how do we fill in the gap between the close of the book of Acts and the 21st century? I think for a lot of us, there are big chunks of Christian history that might kind of just be blanks for us. So in part of what we're doing is we're trying to recapture this Christian story, recapture the story of the faithful. Or another way to think about that is we are trying to populate our cloud of witnesses, continue to think about who are those people up there who came before us, who maybe even shape the way we think, shape the way we understand Christianity, who we may not know about. So when you get to the end of this course, when you think about that cloud of witnesses, we're going to introduce a lot more people to populate that cloud. So Annie, as I said, you are somebody who took this course. What is your history with CWC?
Yeah, so I took CWC fall of 2010 when I was a freshman at Bethel. I can't believe that's 12 years ago now. And then that spring, I was hired to TA for the course. So I was going between, I really wanted to TA for CWC. I loved it when I took the class, but I also had a job offer at Chipotle, and luckily Sam offered me free burritos, free burrito bowls. But I also came into Bethel as a history and social studies education major. So this class is obviously something I really liked. And so I TA'd for 4 terms. I kind of understood a little bit more about how to teach. It was really good training. I did student teaching. I graduated, and I taught history for a bit in the cities. And then I moved out to South Korea for the first time. And that's where I got my master's degree in international studies. And the whole time, I keep in contact with Sam, because we're buddies. And then I moved back to Minnesota in 2018, and I get a message from Sam and Chris Garrett saying, "Hey, would you want to teach CWC in fall 2018?" And I had to stop and reread. And of course, my response is yes. I just didn't know how to convey to them the extent of the yes. Of course, I want to teach this for all time. And so I've been teaching with professors that taught me, which is a pretty wild context. Sam has a similar story too. And so, yeah, it's teaching since 2018, and now from Seoul again. So that's kind of my story. Sam, your story is very much the same. except for you can one up me in like every avenue of the story. So go ahead, tell us
My
your
story's
story.
yeah, my story is the same. It's just older. So I took the course in the fall of 19, well, the date starts with 1995. Now the difference is I wasn't planning on being a history teacher. I was a computer science major, and actually it was TAing for this course. I remember I had this day where I was leading a workshop. There was about 70 students in the choir room getting ready for a test, and I was standing up in front of the group of people, and I just realized, like, this is the most fun thing that I get to do. What if I just did this for a job? So I changed my major to history, and my dream job was to someday teach CWC. And when I was 24 years old, I graduated from Bethel with a degree in history. I taught art at a high school in Mobile, Alabama for a year. I came back, studied at the University of Minnesota, and when I was 24, I got an email from the person who was my mentor when I was here, and she asked me the same question you got asked. Would you like to teach CWC? And so it was like my dream job was offered to me when I was 24, and I jumped in and have been teaching it ever since. So we tell you these stories because for most of you, you're going to have a great summer. You're going to take this course. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to go on to live happy, productive lives. But we want to warn you that this course, at least for you and for me, had the power to really kind of shape our destinies. So be warned, this class can have that effect on people. Annie, I talked about the cloud of witnesses. You're definitely one of the people in my cloud of witnesses, although you're still winning the race. So the metaphor kind of breaks down that way. As you think about people students are going to encounter in this course, who might be an example of somebody who you would say is a crucial figure in your cloud of witnesses that students are going to meet in this class?
Sure, yeah. So if I think about my cloud of witnesses, I like to also think about it like a religious family tree. And you do those like genealogy things, and you figure out like where you're from, where your family is from. And so I think like one of my really big clouds of witnesses is a more recent one. And then the other one is way back in that religious family tree. So the first one I want to talk about is Martin Luther King Jr., who I already mentioned before. Obviously important for the 1960s civil rights movement, important for how we understand civil disobedience as a right in American history. And I also like him in the cloud of witnesses because most students are familiar with him. Most students have read The Letter from a Birmingham Jail, and they come into the course having some of his background there. And we take it a step further, and we think about, if I were to ask you, what are Western values, or what are Western cultural values, American cultural values? A lot of students would say freedom, justice, law, order. And those are all great things. And these values are all important, but sometimes they do conflict. And in the person of Martin Luther King Jr., we see how those things do conflict. And so it's always relevant. These ideas of Martin Luther King Jr. are always relevant as we talk about humanity, as we talk about inhumanity, as we talk about humans with power and authority. And MLK is also the bookends of this course. We start with him in the 1960s in America, somebody close in our religious family tree to us. And then we go way back and we watch the trail of Western cultural values meet up with him later on in the 20th century. So that's one of mine. Sam, what are your cloud of witnesses?
I think one of my favorite people we learn about in this course is a 4th and 5th century North African bishop named Augustine of Hippo. He's an unbelievably fascinating person. He's also a really important person. He is probably the most important Western Christian theologian. Some people think about him as the most important person for shaping Christian theology next to the Apostle Paul. Like Augustine just kind of creates the whole board on which theology is played and discussed. But what interests me about Augustine is not necessarily his influence as a theologian, or not entirely that, but it's that he writes this book called The Confessions. And when I was a student in CWC, we read the entirety of Confessions. We're not going to have you read the whole book, but we're going to introduce you to it. We're going to read a little part of it. And in Confessions, this is Augustine's spiritual autobiography. So he's writing a firsthand account of what his conversion looked like. He grew up, being actually opposed to Christianity, and he has this really profound, long journey towards conversion, and he writes about that. And I'm so interested because he writes about his questions and his struggles and the things that become roadblocks to his understanding of Christianity and his acceptance of Christianity. And it's this beautiful story, but the thing that I love about him is that I feel this kind of resonance. When I read about his questions and his struggles, I feel like those are things that I think, those are things that I feel. And it's interesting because he is living, 16 centuries before me in a different part of the world, in a different culture. Nothing could be more different between him and me. But at the same time, every time I read Augustine, I feel so close to him. I feel this kind of resonance in my chest. So he's definitely part of my cloud of witnesses. Annie, anyone else you got?
Yeah, so the other person I want to talk about, similar kind of time frame and region. So Perpetua is a woman who was living in around 200s AD in Roman North Africa, in Carthage, so also from North Africa. And you'll see in CWC, we spend a lot of the first unit, especially kind of floating around the Mediterranean and Northern Africa. She's a young mother. She's 22 years old. She's put to death for her faith. So she's a part of this big persecution of Christians in the early life of Christianity. And I chose her because, Sam, you were saying that Augustine, you feel really close to him. Perpetua, I feel like, is the hardest person to empathize with, not because I don't think anything she did was, I think she's amazing, right? So she denied her family. She denied her friends. She took persecution with gladness. She went to death for her faith. I think that all of that is beautiful and horrible and kind of every emotion about it. But she's a good reflection for me of what it's like to be a Christian now in the 21st century, whether I'm in America or here in South Korea. Being a Christian is quite comfortable. And I've never, ever felt persecuted for my faith as a Christian. And in fact, like, there's a lot of merits to come with being a Christian in a predominantly Christian society. I've never felt any stress over or going to worship, right? And so it's really hard for me to understand giving up family, giving up friends, giving up your life, let alone all three of those things. And so I think she's a good exercise and reflection of how Christianity has changed from the 200s AD to now globally. And I think it's also important because she shows that Northern Africa, just like Augustine, is an important hub for early Christianity. And so if I'm thinking about my cloud of witnesses as a genealogy, it's like, oh, okay. And I also go back here. I go to Carthage, right? And I have some family in Carthage. I found some people there. So it's known for its martyrdom. It's known for theology. And it's an important part of my faith journey to understand Perpetua. So you'll be reading about her pretty soon. Sam, do you have anyone else?
Yeah, I'm going to pick somebody from much later in the course. So in the 17th century, there's a French mathematician and philosopher named Blaise Pascal. And I'm interested in him because he is somebody who's living at the heart of the scientific revolution. So right between Galileo and Newton, right? He is deeply involved in the scientific revolution. But at the same time that the world is looking increasingly to science and reason, and that's what his life is about. At the same time, he also has this questions about, like, well, if reason is the only thing we look to, if science is the only thing we look to, what happens to religion? What happens to the things in Christianity that maybe transcend reason or are trans-rational, right? That go beyond that. And Pascal has this famous quote where he says, "The heart has its reasons of which reason does not know what to make of." So he's saying, yes, we know things in our head rationally, but he says we also feel things in our heart. And he says that is a kind of knowledge in the same way rational, scientific, logical thinking is a kind of knowledge. And he's really wrestles with that. And he says, in order to have real religion, we need to hold on to both of those things. And we need to respect both of those things as different but legitimate ways of knowing both what we think and what we feel. And I'm really moved by that because I think at times I'm somebody who might be a little bit too impacted by the rationality of things like the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. And Pascal, really challenges me to say, but there's this other thing too. So he's a really important person for me. So those are just 4 people you're going to meet in this course. And as we said, you're going to meet a whole lot more. We're going to keep populating that cloud of witnesses. Andy, that's all the time that we have. We'll be back in just a minute to wrap up this webisode. All almost out of time, so let's just jump to the end. It's happy time. Annie, happy birthday to actor, singer, magician Neil Patrick Harris, who turns 49 today. Annie, Harris is halfway to an EGOT. He has 5 Emmys and 1 Tony. He's been nominated for a Grammy, but did not win, and he's never been nominated for an Oscar. Annie, if you could win any award, what would it be?
Okay, this is kind of like out of left field, but literary translation awards, those are things and they're amazing. Like the fact that somebody can take a novel that's already beautifully written in one language and then translate it to another language, and then they should receive all the words. Even somebody who does it poorly should receive an award. Like that blows my mind. And so look, my Korean is like elementary school level. Like I can talk to 8-year-olds pretty fluently. So that ship has sailed. I'm not going to be able to win a literary translation award. If, however, I could go back in time, I would learn a language so I could do that. Okay, so next, happy anniversary to Benjamin Franklin, who proved that lighting is electricity, supposedly, on this date in 1752. Sam, how long do you think you could survive without electricity?
This is interesting because I'm not somebody, I am not a survivalist type person. I'm not somebody who thinks they would live very long in the zombie apocalypse or even a power outage. At the same time, like I think it would be, I want to say like I wouldn't make it a day, but I think it would be longer. I think like I could maybe make it like a month or 2. I mean, as long as I'm not being chased by zombies, if it's just like the hard part would be, I don't think I would be able to find or provide food for myself, at least very much. So I think I could make it a few weeks, maybe a month, before I eventually perish. And I think that would come pretty quickly. So I think I'm pretty reliant on electricity. Happy trails to Meredith Willson, the writer of The Music Man, which is one of my favorite musical, died on this day in 1984. Annie, what is your favorite musical?
Oh, okay, it's gonna change any day, but I think today, Jesus Christ Superstar, 1973. Have you seen that, Sam? Have you seen the movie?
I have, the Norman Jewison directed movie. It's great.
It's so good. It throws you into the 70s. And then there's this one song where Jesus hits this high note that is unreal. It is like inhuman. It's godly. So yeah, probably Jesus Christ Superstar.
Technically, that's an actor named Teddy Neely playing Jesus who's hitting that note, but I'm sure Jesus could hit that note as well. So, all right, that is all the time that we have. So time for the big finish. Students, remember, take your syllabus quiz, do your first Poodle response, letting us know about who you are, where you're going to be this summer, what you're excited about in this course, and something else interesting about you. I look forward to watching these videos. You should watch them as well. Get to know the people you're taking this course with. And I hope this is a great semester. As always, you can email me, s-mulberry@bethel.edu. That's all the time that we have. Say goodnight, Stacy.